Good to see you here in this large number. Welcome today to this lecture on Sartre and De Beauvoir. My name is Lenja Slierendrecht and I work for Studium Generale, and we organize lectures like today and many other events, as you could have seen behind me in the PowerPoint. We organize them in the first place for students of this university, but everyone is welcome. And today we are gathered to learn more about perhaps history's most famous couple, Sartre and De Beauvoir. As founding fathers of existentialism and new feminism, they protested in the streets to demand change and addressed individual responsibility and radical human freedom. What can we learn from them in our current times with uncertainties, wars, climate change, and other problems? It is time for an introduction to France's most illustrious thinkers by no less than Professor Dr. Ruud Welten. Ruud Welten is Professor of Contemporary Approaches to Human Subjectivity at Erasmus School of Philosophy. He is an expert on modern French philosophers and wrote, among other works, Who's Afraid of Simone de Beauvoir, on feminism, existentialism, God, love and sex. And he also wrote a small biography, in Dutch called Elementaire Deeltjes, on Sartre. We will listen to his lecture first, and afterwards there is room for questions. Give him a warm hand of applause, Professor Ruud Welten.
Thank you. So that's a warm welcome. And it's great that you all here and that we can talk about, well, I think two very interesting philosophers and very promising also for our times. At least that's what I think. So, but I want to share your thoughts also after I will talk for 3/4 of an hour or something. I always like to talk about Sartre and Beauvoir, especially for students. That sounds a little bit silly to say, but because I always feel, and it's really my experience, that it touches them. It has something to offer, especially, when you, this sounds a little bit strange to say, especially when you are young. And that's not strange. And you will see that this kind of energy, young energy, is always, although Sartre, for instance, became quite old, is always there in the philosophy of Sartre and De Beauvoir. What I will do, I will give a kind of an introduction into the thought of existentialism, and after we can discuss whether or not, of course, we can use it for our times. So the title was and is Existentialism in Activist Times. Before I begin, I want to start with a quote, and I tell you later what it is. So, and this is the quote. All those who recognize the sovereignty of the state of Israel and also believe that the Palestinians have the right to sovereignty for the same reasons and consider the Palestinian issue as something fundamental, must admit that the policy of the Israeli government is literally insane and deliberately avoids all possible solutions to the problem. Therefore, it is politically correct to say that Israel and the Palestinians are in a state of war. In this war, terrorism is the Palestinians' only weapon. It is a terrible weapon, but the poor oppressed have no other. We must now approve of Palestinian terrorism. If I read this quote, well, you can guess, well, maybe this is in a blog or in a paper of yesterday or a Free Palestine activist blogging, whatever it is. But as you can guess, it is a quote of Jean-Paul Sartre, 1972. Well, is this actually or not? Is this topical for now or not? We can discuss that. So it is a firm statement. It is a firm statement of Sartre in response to the massacre of the Israeli Olympic team at Munich Olympics. And it was published in La Cause du Peuple. I come back to that, a French communist, even Maoist paper October 15 in 1972. And I remember this quite well because I was 10 years old, and of course I was not very politically well aware of things, but I know that also my parents that were watching TV in these times, because in my, I don't know exactly, but in my memory, it lost at least 2 weeks that the Palestinians hijacked the people from Israel in the Olympic team, and it was in the news, and everybody was watching it, and it was really a massacre. It ended up extremely badly, so all the Israeli supporters were killed. And then Sartre came with this statement, and you can imagine that the entire world, and this very famous Jean-Paul Sartre, was extremely angry at him. It was only 2 years later, in 1974 then, that Sartre defended the actions of the Baader-Meinhof-Gruppe. The same story, everyone was shocked by it. So it was not left-wing, but it was ultra left-wing. So, of course, this has something to do with, well, what is it, activism, left-wing activism, whatever you can call it. But let's see. So I want to talk about Sartre and De Beauvoir, also because for now we know, after some biographies, also the latest biography by Kate Kirkpatrick on Simone de Beauvoir, that most of the thoughts, that their entire philosophy, they developed it together. I will talk about the bad faith, about activism. You cannot just, it's true, so it's mostly in the books of Sartre, but as you know, de Beauvoir wrote a lot, not only The Second Sexe, but also existentialist books. They were a famous couple from 1946, 47, highly influential, also politically, very politically involved in the Algerian War, for instance, with their public opinions. So, and very much discussed. So, yeah, existentialism in activist time. It was not me who gave the title of today, but I think it is quite challenging title, because I have to explain what is existentialism first, what are activist times, and are these the same? What is activism? What is exactly activism? And is existentialism really an activist philosophy? And I think it is, but then of course I have to explain something about what is existentialism and what is activism. To do that, I will give some, not too much, some historical background. So you have to know that existentialism was a reaction to. It was not just people writing on universities some papers and books and going to congresses, etc., etc. So Sartre and Beauvoir didn't like that at all. And so even they didn't finish the university. This is also a little bit, yeah, due to the French culture. So the difference between the university culture in Paris and the rest of the philosophers has always been very, very large. And you see that also in postmodernism and even until today. But this background is extremely important. So the background of the situation of France in World War II was entirely different from, for instance, those of the Netherlands or England. It was governed by Pétain, who was a right-wing politician who was extremely popular, who had some awards from out of the First World War, and who stated his government in Vichy, not in Paris. So this is the famous Vichy government, and he collaborated, as you see here, with Hitler. So I come back to that, but it is understand that you know that this background of Paris, mainly Paris, in World War II until 1944 was, as I said, not academic. It was not about universities, but rather theater, literature, films, bars, the famous Les Deux Magots, Café Flore. They are still there. If you go there, it's not what it was at the time. But still, these were very important places where people were discussing things that matter. But not philosophers as a very separate discipline or something like that, but philosophers talking with writers, with theater makers, with musicians. And this was a little bit already from the late 19th century, a culture. It was not invented by Sartre and Beauvoir, but it was at least 100 years old. So in De Magot and Café Flore, people like André Gide, who at the time won the Nobel Prize, very influential writer, but also Ernest Hemingway, who was at the time in Paris, Picasso, Apollinaire, Louis Aragon, but also artists, musicians. You see here Miles Davis, so chatting up with Juliette Gréco, who had a short relation at the time. Relations at the time were also very something, well, not new, but the form in which they existed. It was a culture of resistance and recalcitrance. And why resistance? And this is what Sartre explained after World War II in an American newspaper, is, well, every step we made there on the terrace, or while all the Germans were there, was already a kind of an act of resistance. And you see that in this culture of resistance, and it's not only about people fighting, but people writing, people making art, people making theater, is that exactly there the resistance became had a kind of a shape that became so extremely important in French culture. So even a lot of editors, Édition Minuit, still existing today. You know, it is the editor from the midnight, where the presses are rolling, but of course forbidden by the Nazis. So I tell you this short historical information because it is quite important. A lot of people, if they start to write, read, for instance, Sartre, or just reading Beauvoir, read it as just a plain philosophy. And it is true, it is a philosophy, but it is a philosophy that is reacting to a situation. It is not that much a theory, and then eventually we will see how we can use it or something. And that's very typical for existentialism, for French existentialism. So now we have to explain here what is then existentialism, and then the first question: what is freedom? Yeah? If this ultra right-wing Pétain told the French people that collaboration with Hitler, that they had no other choice, that the Nazis, that this was the Dritte Reich, was the new world order, and we had to obey to this order. Then the question, the philosophical question of Sartre and De Beauvoir was, but what then is freedom? If this is a kind of a freedom, that's a strange kind of freedom. If the only thing we have to do is to obey and to collaborate with that. And this is really the beginning, I mean, not historically, but the beginning of the thinking, the origin of the thought of existentialism. What is freedom? Existentialism is a philosophy of freedom, not a philosopher thinking about what freedom is, but in itself, it is always the movement of freedom in itself. So then the underlying question is, what is it to be human? And here I have to go a little bit into philosophy to explain this, because what is freedom? Mostly, if philosophers writing on freedom or liberty, they are writing on political philosophy, social philosophy, etc. But for Sartre, yes, indeed, it is also political freedom, yeah? So we have to take a look at the role of French Revolution here. That's true, but it starts very much earlier. It starts with, what is a human being? What is consciousness? And Sartre and Beauvoir were very influenced by a new philosophy that came up in Germany, phenomenology. The phenomenology of Heidegger and Husserl. And Husserl taught what is consciousness? Consciousness is exactly not what we think it is, namely that it is something like a little bit like a computer who is doing something. But Husserl taught consciousness is always consciousness of something. You cannot talk about consciousness of a thing. And this was the beginning of phenomenology. If I'm conscious, I am conscious of something. And this means that I am related to something which is not me. And this not me, Sartre took that very literally. Did not me, he understood this as a nothingness, le néant, as a negation. I am not the tree that I am looking at. I don't know what I am, but I don't have an identity like the thing or other people that I am looking at. And this is the beginning, this is the real kernel of what consciousness is and what freedom is. This means that consciousness, human consciousness, is nothing but freedom. And here, it turns out to be maybe that you think, well, that's quite theoretical, and I can have another kind of a philosophy of what consciousness is, take a philosophy of mind or something very interesting, other kinds of phenomenologies. But the point here is that freedom must be understood as what I am. So if the question of ontology, so which is the question of beingness, what is being? For Sartre and Beauvoir, as Sartre wrote this in Being and Nothingness, and he wrote it in the midst of World War II, L'être le néant, and in this book he wrote for the first time that consciousness is consciousness of something, which means that consciousness is nothing, which means that this I, this consciousness, is determined by nothing. Because if it is already something, consciousness would cease to exist. So two stones are not conscious of each other. So you need a void, you need something which is not there, so to say, which is consciousness in itself. Now, and this is freedom. Now, I hope that I'm clear, but I think this is extremely important to talk about what is freedom in existentialism. It's not that much striving after freedom. So freedom is not something that belongs to somebody. Like you say, well, something can be beautiful or ugly, and free or not free, and it is clear that some people are free and others are not free. But that's not the point. Consciousness in itself is already freedom. The only thing is that we have a kind of a technique always to forget that. I come back to it. So you have to understand freedom quite radically. To understand yourself as a free being. Being is nothingness. And this became, in existentialism, even an imperative. Take yourself as a nothingness. That's the only position from which you can act. Because if I am already something determined, for instance, like Darwin taught, or like so many other philosophers taught, that you are already something. So you know, whatever kind of philosophy you mention, a lot of philosophers will talk about, well, what is a human being? A human being is a being with this and this characteristics. For Sartre, a human being doesn't have any characteristics. This is exactly what freedom is. Now, what does that mean? That means that you are not determined. You are not determined by nature, not by social circumstances. There is no hidden plan, and here you see the atheist influence in existentialism. There's no God, which means not that much what people always say, that there's no meaning in life, but the meaning of life is up to you. You can do with if you decide there is no meaning of life, whatever that means. But the point is that the meaning of life is entirely up to you. And then, of course, I feel here the objections. But then, aren't you always defined by culture, by social conditions? Yeah, in a way, yes, of course. So I had parents, you had parents, I had a school, you had a school. I live in a kind of in a culture, you maybe in the same or from another country, whatever it is, there is a certain determination, which is true. But the point is, and this is the point that changes everything, very radically, that I am related to my determination. So I can say to my parents, mostly if I'm 15 years old, so what puberty is, which is a very good sketch of the attitude of existentialism, you can say, no, I don't want to be what you want me to be. So I think this idea of puberty also makes clear that you are free. So someone in puberty, just me now, the cliche idea of puberty is not, well, I do not know what I am, but the only thing is I don't want to be that what you told me that I have to be. School, society, norms and values. So another way to say this is a human being is a being, a nothingness, that is able to say no. Yeah, if you read the work of the colleague of Sartre, Albert Camus, so the famous book on the rebel, L'homme révolté. It is the first sentence of the book. Human being is a being that is able to say no. Animals do not say no. Animals are determined by nature. Darwin was right, but not about human beings. So you have to understand that a human being is exactly not a very sophisticated animal or something like that. Because a human being is determined, if I fall, I fall down and not up, and things I cannot choose that. That's true. So I am determined by nature, the laws of nature. That's entirely true. But the point is, I relate to it. I relate to the situations I am confronted with. The ability to say no. And this is what self-consciousness is. For the philosophers among us, they already know that this has a large history in philosophy, namely in the dialectics of Hegel, which is so influential also in existentialism. If you don't know nothing about it, don't worry. You don't have to understand it today or tonight to understand what existentialism is. But what it is, revolution. This is exactly what revolution is. Revolution is the ability to say no. So it is enough. What you did to me, whatever it is, the king, the social relations, this is enough, and I don't like it. I don't know the solution, but there is a big no towards it, which is the affirmation of the nothingness that I am. So I am no longer determined by it. So existentialism, you can think of existentialism, especially Sartre and Beauvoir, as a kind of a fulfillment of the French Revolution. And of course, French Revolution at the end of the 18th century is a culture that liberates itself from two things, namely monarchy, the king is beheaded, and God. And from now on, man stands alone. Humans are standing alone. It is, of course, here's also important if you're going to read The Second Sex, the Deuxième Sexe of Simone de Beauvoir. It's in a way the very same topic. It's the topic not only of freedom, I come to that, but also that two males here, we get French Revolution cease to understand, human beings are cease to understand themselves from these male figures, the king and God. Yes, and God is a man. That's what monotheism at the end teaches us. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So nothing is more uncomfortable than standing alone. So having no hold in life. After all, life before French Revolution, what was so important for the becoming of Europe, life was structured after the king and God. I am determined. I am determined in a hierarchy of the society I live in. I am determined already by God. And now We don't trust it anymore, we say no to it. Yeah? This is exactly what the French Revolution is. I'm not saying it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that the violence can be understood from that, but this is the spirit, so to say, of French Revolution that comes back in the thought of Sartre and Beauvoir. You see that also in the later Sartre. He made some analysis also about the French Revolution. So nothing, as I said, is more uncomfortable than standing alone, having no hold in life. If you are nothing, well, that's difficult. You want to be something, and everybody tell you that you have to become something. What are you going to do? What is the profession? What is your profession? What is your identity? Things like that. And also a topic, identity. But in Sartre and Beauvoir, there's no such a thing as identity. At least not an identity that is cling to me. I am determined by my identity. So it is a quite human reaction, so to say, to run away from this freedom. A free man or free woman is helpless and has nothing to fall back on. And here we come to this famous concept that was developed by Sartre and Beauvoir at the same time. And the most important descriptions you will find in the famous book of Sartre, Being and Nothingness, is bad fate, la mauvaise foi. What is bad fate? It's quite simple. So mostly we think of in moral terms, and in a way that's true. But why? Why is it bad fate? Bad fate is considering and acting as if you are not free. No, I'm not free. I am determined by. So, well, there's nothing I can do. It's my social conditions that made me what I am. Now, this is bad fate. Why is bad fate? Because I know better. I am free. I am nothing. But I act, I talk as if I am not. And the interesting thing is that, you have to understand here from your freedom and not from a firm foundation that philosophy, religion, psychology, etc. will offer you. Women are always this and this, and men, at the end, everything boils down to. Why should it? Why can't you change that situation? You see that here in Simone de Beauvoir's famous Deuxième Sexe. And that is a very famous sentence, you know that from the book, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Although very often wrongly translated as or understood as something, one is not born, but they make you a woman. No, there is no they that make you a woman, that you become a woman. It's you who are there to make yourself what you are. And this is also the main thesis of the book of Deuxième Sexe. So in Western society, women are increasingly taking a subordinate place to men. That's clear. I'm afraid it is different, and the shapes are different than at the Simone de Beauvoir's times, but the situation is mainly the same. So this means there is no, for Beauvoir, necessity, no biological, cultural, psychological, or whatsoever, for this reallocation of women. It could just as easily have been otherwise. And from this follows that a society in which one sex is programmatically placed on the second order is, for Beauvoir, an unfree society. And this is something which is important not only for women. It's not about just feminism. It's something which is so important for our society. Men, women, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. We are living in an unfree society in which half of the human race is placed because of their sex, today we will say gender, on the second place. There's no reason for that, not biologically, not socially, not historically. And you can say, well, if you take a look at history, you see always that. Yeah, so what? You can change it. That's the point. So even you can create a situation that never has been. So this, and this, I think that's so important to understand here. This is the influence here of French Revolution, of revolution anyhow. This is also a little bit of reason why both Sartre and De Beauvoir were always so extremely enthusiastic of all kinds of revolutions. So, to say, yeah, I am a woman and yeah, it's good like that, having children and well, I stay at home. It's just the way things are. I have no choice, my back is against the wall. It's too late to choose, there's nothing I can do. This is an endless production, this is bad fate, endless production of excuses supported by capitalism, but also by science, by psychology even, by sociology and by bad philosophy. So you are, which means you are nothing, which means you are not determined. And you take yourself as that. You have to take yourself as that. And of course, you are always in a situation, a particular confluence of circumstances. But these circumstances doesn't give you any reason to say, well, see, it's the circumstances, not my choice, but well, it is what it is. Nothing I can do, don't talk to me about, no. These never give an excuse to me. See, there's nothing I can do, it's just the circumstances, not me. But what is existentialism? Because you are aware, you are related, as I explained a few minutes ago, you are related to your situation, you are not determined by it. This is my situation, and this is not my determination, so to say. You don't like the circumstances, just change them. This is exactly what is called engagement, engagement. Engage with what? This is, of course, the question. Well, with yourself, with the freedom you are. You are your life, which means life never escapes you. That's so easy to say, oh, I don't understand it anymore. Yeah, that's all. We always in that situation. Life never escapes you. You are nothing but your choices, which does not mean I can choose everything and I can choose, but then you can say, well, a lot of people that cannot choose. You're right about that, but that's not the argument. The argument is, I am freedom, I am nothing, I am not determined, I am nothing but the choices I make. I make myself by the choices I make. Whether they are rational or not, what happens to me? Can I live my life as if everything in every situation that I am in is my choice? Well, in a way, you can understand, so all the situations in which you are very happy, that's no problem, but the situations that you did not choose, so to say. But this is what you is. It is you who have to deal with it. That's the point. This is what choice means here. It is you who have to deal with it, and no one else, which makes this is your responsibility. You are responsible for the freedom you are, not for the being, the determined being you are. So it's not about having a choice, as we say also in Dutch, but to fully identify with your life in your situation, be it affirmative. You can recognize in Nietzsche's amor fati, the will to power, or negative in my examples of the revolt, of the rebel of Albert Camus. And this is what, from an existentialist viewpoint, this is what activism is. And yes, sometimes it can take the form of occupation or political, but it all starts much more basically. To be engaged with the life you are, which is your life. And there is no excuse. Life never escapes you. It's you who has to deal with it, no one else. And even Sartre goes Sartre and Beauvoir, they are going very far with this. So choice is always radical. To choose, Sartre writes somewhere, To choose is to choose for entire humanity. So what does that mean? If I choose something, not just a trousers or new car and a collar. No, if I choose something which is my life, let me give just a topical example. So let's say I am a vegetarian, not because I don't like meat, but just because I don't like bioindustry, I don't like this industry, I don't like the way that human beings are dealing with animals, and we shouldn't do that, and this is why I am a vegetarian. Well, this is worth nothing if I am in a situation together with you, and we are out of dinner, and I see that you order some meat, then it's my responsibility towards myself to say, well, what are you doing? Don't you know what is happening with animals, etc., etc.? So I am even responsible here for the other. I know people always say, well, but I want to be tolerant. But yeah, what does that mean if I say, you know, it's my choice that I don't eat meat because bioindustry, etc., and this is your choice that you eat meat. Well, that's worth nothing. And so this means that the choice you make on the human existentialist level, or the level of existence, is quite radical. Another, maybe even a better example for this is, well, if I'm a believer, let's say I'm a Christian believer, I believe in God. What does that mean? Well, I believe, things like, I believe that it was God who created me. Well, that doesn't make any sense if I say to you, but he didn't create you. I don't know who created you. No, of course. If I understand myself as created by God, then you are all created by God. Otherwise, it is meaningless. So, and this is what the choice is. So this is not a philosophy of tolerance or something like that. And it might be, in a way, difficult, awkward even. And people are always saying, oh, Sartre, that's really a cliche, that's so individualistic. Well, you didn't read Sartre, so Sartre is not individualistic. Maybe in the beginning you will find some chapters in the book which are quite individualistic, like in my story, but here you see where it becomes social. And there again, here we have the French Revolution. This is the idea of fraternity. If we want to change something, if we want, in my example, for instance, if I want to change that, I am dreaming of a world where nobody is ever killing animals, at least not in the way that bioindustry is doing for eating them, then it is only by fraternity, so that we do that together. So you see here that this philosophy is quite radical. And also in the later, people often forget that. So Sartre became older, of course. In fact, he became quite old. And in 1960, he wrote a second large book, which was less influential. At the time that new philosophers were beginning, like Gilles Deleuze, like Michel Foucault, Jacques Lacan, etc. But it is a very interesting philosophy, I think, especially for our topic of existentialism and activism, because here he really wants to develop a social philosophy from the spirit of French Revolution. This was Critique de la raison dialectique, the critics of the dialectical reason, 1960. And for instance, he describes here the difference between active passivity and active activity. Now, what is active passivity? We think that we are active, but in most cases we are not. And Sartre gives a beautiful example, which is highly inspired by the film that at the time was so famous by Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times. I don't know whether you've seen that, but you should see it. And you see there, Charlie Chaplin there is working on a assembly line. So lopende band, is that a word? I don't know. So the production line. And Charlie Chaplin he has to do a lot of actions, but this assembly line is going a little bit too fast. So he is acting, yes, he's acting, but he has to act exactly what the machine tells him. Now, and this is what Sartre describes as active passivity. At the end, it seems to be a kind of an activity, but it is a passivity. And this is a little bit the Sartrean jargon. The machine is here an inert object, so an object that doesn't move. Now, this example is quite, I think that's not a very difficult example, but Sartre describes who also a society or a political system might become such an inert thing. And we all turn around this thing and we just act as the thing which is dead and not moving orders us. And we have to, if we take the freedom responsibility, the responsibility for the freedom we are, then we have to unite here. This is fraternity. And here we come to the idea of an active activity. And an active activity is determined by nothing. It is the big no I mentioned before. So, on this slide, in the summer of 68, of course, May 68, Paris, you know, the students' revolts. And Sartre and De Beauvoir, who were very famous, they were arresting because they were distributing a Maoist paper, the very same Maoist paper that I mentioned before, where the quote of the Palestinians was published 4 years after. Now, Sartre and Beauvoir were not at all interested in Maoist philosophy, which was so very influential and so popular, the Red Book, etc., for this student generation. But the only thing they recognized in it, a new kind of a revolution, and they thought we have to support that. De Gaulle, who was at the time the president of France, they ordered immediately to freedom. On n'emprisonne pas Voltaire, which means one doesn't put a Voltaire in jail. And that's a beautiful kind of a spirit, especially here of de Gaulle. Huh? You don't put a Voltaire in jail. Now, who was Voltaire? Voltaire, 18th century, was the first one who dared to say no in a political way. And if somebody was put in jail, it was Voltaire, many, many times, in the Bastille, which was liberated during the first days of the French Revolution. Voltaire was already dead, but still, this was the idea. So, some pictures here. You see here Sartre, who was visiting, and you can even guess it from this picture, very old man and nearly blind. At the end of his life, he ended up in he ceased to in 1980. He was completely blind. But you see here Cohn-Bendit, still very active. During the press conference I told you about, when he was visiting Andreas Baader and Ulrike Meinhof in Stuttgart, in the Stammheim jail, which was really an act of, whoa, what is Sartre doing? And I say this because, I want to show this because, and this is the last point I want to make, is that Sartre later, and this is not so famous, this is the later Sartre also, was really defending the idea of the intellectual. And I think for us, we are here on a university, and most of you, or all of you, do university studies, and we are intellectuals. Now, which means so, and we living a little bit in a culture, especially years ago, that we say, well, intellectual, well, that's very proud if you say that, and you have to think also of other people who are not intellectuals. But Sartre was really defending the idea of the intellectual. And what is the idea of the intellectual? The intellectual is not a scientist, it is not a philosopher, it is not something who is very wise, but it is somebody who dare to criticize and who is stepping out of the role as a scientist or as a philosopher. He's not speaking in the name of whatever kind of philosophy or in the name of whatever kind of science, but he dared to criticize it if it is needed. And the interesting example that Sartre gives, which is now so famous because of the film, is of Oppenheimer, who sooner or later, when he invented, so to say, the atomic bomb and realized what he was doing, he was stepping out of the play of science. And he was criticizing the idea and asking questions like, well, is this really a good idea? And should we do that? So here you see that even determination is never absolute. You can always step out of it, and you can criticize it. You can say no. So, yeah, I think I want to end, and I give the floor to you, and I hope that we can discuss and we can see what Sartre and Beauvoir think about, or what you think about activism today. And what is activism? Well, is it protesting against Israel, as Sartre did? Is it Extinction Rebellion, or attacking art pieces, or occupations? Whatever it is. For now, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ruud Welten, for this enlightening lecture. I can imagine that there are people who would like to respond to what Ruud Welten just told us. And if not, I can ask the first question if that helps you. Yeah, I see you. I see a hand. Sorry, my colleague is coming to you with the microphone, otherwise no one can hear you.
Hello, I have a question. You ended with saying that determination is an absolute and you can step out of it, but I don't understand that completely, because are you saying determination, it exists, but then you can step out of it so it doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. But so then the question is, but what is determination? So we tend to think that we are determined by social circumstances, by history, by biological circumstances, which in a way is true, of course. So I am also objected, and you are objected to laws of nature. And of course you can say, I am determined. But the point is, a human being, unlike an animal, and this is what I mean, can step out of it, but maybe it is better to say, it's relating to it. So, for instance, if an illness attacks me, then of course I can say, well, that's not my choice. How can you say that I'm not determined? My choice was something else in life, and now I am ill, and the end is coming. But the point here is not you are determined by it, but this is the situation you have to deal with. And there is no way, from the existentialist viewpoint, to say, this is not my life, this is the life I never chose. Or if from one day on the other day I am in the midst of a war, my country is in a war, of course I can say, well, this is not my war, I have nothing to do with it, so it's just other people, and this is not my life. But if this is not your war, you can do something about it. Even if you say, yeah, but they will kill me, well, then this is in a way that's sounds a little bit strange to say, but also this is a choice for who you are or what you are. So it is this relation towards determination.
Okay, so determination in this sense is more like laws of nature than how you're supposed to feel.
Yeah, but it is not nature that determines your feelings.
There's another question here in the front. I can give you mine too.
So thank you very much, first of all. But then I was wondering about existentialism and activism, because I feel like it's almost looking as if activism is like some form of exercising existentialism. But I feel like you can also just decide for yourself, or like to relate to this inanimate object, or to like the way of how life goes, just to like go with it and choose to be that kind of person, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
Do you understand it correctly then, or is there more of a relation?
Yeah, of course, we all know, as we are sitting all here, we all have different kind of relations towards whatever activism it is, right? Whether you agree with it or you do not agree with it, or you are active. Think of Extinction Rebellion, maybe you're active in it, or you do not agree. Whatever it is, this is exactly what your freedom is. And I say this as an example because I do not want to give the impression that saying by if you want to be an existentialist, you have to be an activist or something like that. So even I would say Extinction Rebellion and being active in it doesn't make you an activist. If your friends saying to you and they are forcing you, well, you have to go with us, otherwise you are not our friend anymore. And so this is what Sartre will call terror. This is fraternity terror, what in French Revolution also occurred a lot. This so means it is your choice. I do not agree with this situation, and now I choose. I don't want to be a human being that is supporting this kind of situation. That will make you an activist. So even you can think of situations in which you are doing nothing and you are an activist. Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice question.
You mentioned that there was a culture of resistance in Paris in their time. And do you think if Sartre and De Beauvoir were living now, would they see us individuals that we recognize our ability to say no? Like, do we live in a time of resistance right now?
Yeah, it is always difficult to say what would they think and what would they say, but especially because they were, it was shaped in their times. But you can make, of course, you can make a kind of a comparison. Saying that, I think there is a lot also of positive ways of activism and saying no. We all know, so in their times it was World War II, it was the war in Algeria, later communism. In the beginning they were very supportive toward communism, later they criticized. In our times we have to deal with other kinds of political situations which are also extremely difficult. But also, think of climate change. So whatever you think of it, so it's a kind of a knife on the throat. And the question here would be not what is the solution, but what is it what you are going to do?
Are there more questions? Yes, right there.
I think you were first.
One and then two, yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about Sartre's stance on pro-Palestine, because he was, of course, very pro-Palestine, but he never fully abandoned a Zionist perspective, for as far as I know, kind of placing himself in a duality between the two, which also angered, well, most notably Josie Fanon, who was Frans Fanon's widow, and then who was very much opposed to Sartre at the end of her life.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know your perspective on that matter.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you are perfectly right by that. So this is also really the attitude of Sartre. The same story counts for Edward Said, who was also, as a young man, one of the friends, so to say, of Sartre. But the Sartre position was always, whatever we think what it is, especially for instance, in communism also. He was not a communist. He was not voting in the Communist Party. He was not a member of the Communist Party, but he called himself a fellow traveler. So I was a little bit at the time also, so not to involve completely in the movement, but to, as an intellectual, yeah, which is a dirty word for us, but as an intellectual, being in a position also to be at a distance of it. And this you see indeed in his relation towards Palestine and Israel. The same is a little bit also for the Baader-Meinhof group. So I made many years ago a study about that, and there you see it's very, very double. So he believed in it because it was a real radical revolutionary group, but he was really also disapproving the violence of it. I think, yeah, the most fair answer to that is that it is important always to be in a position that you can criticize it. And we all know within the Communist Party, criticism at the time was not possible. And therefore, you should be a fellow traveler, as he called it. Yeah.
Your question.
First of all, thank you very much for this lecture. I found it quite interesting. When talking about activism, I had to think of Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah.
And there are activists there that have an increased risk of getting a burnout. Because they think the world is going into a wrong direction.
Yeah.
And they want to change it, and they take a deep step into the nothingness of trying something new.
Yeah.
Which increase their mental distress, I think, which make them burn out. Would you then say that they are too much of bad faith or too little of bad faith?
Okay. Yeah, well, one thing about bad faith is that it's very difficult to say. I think it, but that's a little bit what I think of it, is it is very difficult to say of somebody else, you are in bad faith. I think that's a bad argument to do. The only thing I can do, and this is a little bit like Stoicism, it's about me. If people are saying, well, Sartre is individualism, well, they are right about that point. So bad faith is my relation to myself. But I cannot tell you that you or activists who are, as you describe them, are in bad faith or something like that. That would be my answer, at least. And I think that's, yeah, there are some arguments and quotes in Sartre that will support that, yeah.
There were two questions here in the front.
Yeah, I have a question about his support of La Cause du Peuple.
Yeah.
And you're saying freedom is saying no, but the problem is people also say yes. And the Maoists said yes, just like the Baader-Meinhof group said yes. And he supported them. So doesn't he have a responsibility for the direction the revolt's going, just like in the French Revolution ended up in terror?
Yeah.
So you can say probably it's quite irresponsible just to support anybody who says no.
Yeah, yeah. That's a famous reproach to Sartre, and I think also with some reasons, because people are always mentioning some difficult situation. Sartre was wrong about that. Yes, true. So Sartre is not like most postmodernism, that you have to postpone your ideas about something and that you never can. No, you have to choose, which means that you can make the wrong choices. And that's inherent not only in existentialism, but yeah, if you are fair, in being a human being. We all make choices, and you think, oh, this is a really good choice. I want to marry her, and then 5 years later, you think, oh my God, what have I done? But it is your choice, and it was 5 years of your life. You was responsible for it. I know it feeling in a way, on a certain amount, I also agree with you. So is an intellectual not also responsible to it? But the way you phrase it, you say, yeah, Baader-Meinhof was affirmative, was saying yes, but I think in this jargon, this philosophical way of thinking, I would say this was a big no. And it was so extremely big no that they didn't know what they were doing. And this was it was a huge tragedy. But so people were young and they entered the group and there were killings and up till today they are in jail, you know that. So was Sartre responsible for that? Yeah, to defend, and which is my responsibility today, I think a little bit, to defend here Sartre's position is you always have to be on a distance, which means you are engaged, you are looking at the situation in a critical way. And that, yeah, that's also what a you could say that's also what politicians have to do, but politicians, they have to make a policy about how to deal with it, and that's always the problem. But a philosopher, an existentialism, doesn't have to, and it would even be wrong and bad faith to make a policy and to say we all have to do it like this. Yeah, that would be my answer. But yeah, I understand your question. Yeah.
There was another question right here.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the lecture. I was wondering about the quote you were talking about making a choice is making a choice for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I completely understand it correctly, because in the example you gave of the vegetarian or vegan, then saying if you see your friend eating meat, I mean, now it maybe sound a bit deterministic, but is it then also the obligation of if you have made such a moral choice to convince other people, and how far do you need to go then? Is it just saying your friend, or is it joining Extinction Rebellion, for instance?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, that's the question, and I don't have the answer, and I don't think that Sartre has the answer to that. So there is no end to that, which always makes it also a little bit dangerous. There's something at stake there. That's the point. And if there is really something at stake, if you really think that, and I think that most of us are sitting here, I think that what we are doing with the climate, it's not a very good idea, and we have to change it now. And not saying, well, that's bad for capitalism if we are going to change anything. So then it's quite radical. It's quite radical. So I would say, yeah, the argument of just tolerance doesn't work here anymore. There is some force, but it is a force towards your own. You are responsible for your own freedom. And what does it mean if I say, well, I think it's so important that the climate has to change, but it remains by saying this. What does it mean? So is that an answer to your question? Thanks.
There was a question there in the back. If you can raise your hand again. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I have more, I guess, of a philosophical question, but you say that consciousness is nothing, but on the other side, you say that you can step out of kind of everything and say that I do not agree with this situation and it is my choice to change it. But my question is, so if you can step out and say that I don't agree, it means that you would have beliefs and values, but then what like those beliefs and values, are they not part of the consciousness, and if not, what are they part of? I don't know if it's clear or not.
So you mean, what is the role of beliefs and values?
Yeah, and in like, are beliefs and values parts of consciousness or not? And then if not, what are they part of?
Yeah, okay, I think I understand it. That's a nice question. And I told you about this inert object, the object that doesn't move. So for Sartre, those beliefs from traditions, norms and values can never be on the level of determination. So I am raised this and that, and I'm from that culture. There's nothing I can do. That's the way it is. Even I am a woman, I am a man, and men always doing it. That's stupidity for Sartre and Beauvoir. And so yes, there are norms and values, but you choose them. And this is why I began also with this example of puberty. So this is the moment. I am always interested in that moment, because puberty is the human being, unlike the very small child, that for the first time in his life or her life says, no, I don't want it like this. What do you want? I don't know, but I don't want it like this. So this means that values and traditions and norms might be very important to us, and I think they are, but we can change them, and we have to change them also. I can give also the very simple example, the cliché example of in the Netherlands, of, for instance, the role of Zwarte Piet in the Sinterklaas parties faced. And there you see that, okay, it's a tradition, but you can change. Sometimes you have to change traditions. So even a tradition is not a determination as such. There is always a way, and sometimes even an imperative, a necessity to change it. You see, it is mainly about change also.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. I have a quick question about the definition of freedom. And I'm wondering whether under Sartre's interpretation, there can be degrees of freedom. Because it seems, according to your talk, that everyone is equally free.
Yeah.
And some people decide to do something with this, and some people decide not to do something.
Yeah.
But it seems quite extreme to say that the prisoner locked up in the cell is just as free as me sitting here.
Yeah.
Or perhaps, even phrased alternatively, do you even need like maybe material conditions to be free?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, clear. So the answer to that, and Sartre's answer to this, is that sooner or later I will come up with a counterexample. For instance, so I am in World War II, and I am arrested by the Nazis, and if I do this, I killed, and you call me free. That's not what freedom is. I'm not in a situation, whatever what freedom is. The answer of Sartre is it is exactly in this kind of situation that freedom matters, that you understand that you are free, that you are nothing. You are nothing. Of course, you have to understand what I mean with this. So you are the negation. Whatever it is, the choice is you. Not that much that the other chooses for you. There's a lot of things you can do. Okay, they can kill you. That might be a choice. Well, just let me kill me. But you can fight. You can do any kind of things, and these will determine you. That's the point. So, in general, as soon as we give the counterexample, Sartre will always answer to that as exactly in this kind of situation, freedom here matters. And not that much as, okay, this is an exception of what freedom is. This was your question about, is there how did you call it? A hierarchy, levels of freedom. Huh? So no, there are no levels of freedom. You are completely free. You are your choice. I'm not saying you are choosing. That's something else. That's what consumers do. But you are nothing but what you made out of yourself. Thanks.
There was a question right here.
Hi, thank you for your lecture. I was wondering, we talk a lot about Sartre and his philosophy on freedom. If de Beauvoir thought exactly the same things, like on a theoretical, philosophical standpoint, or did she maybe have other nuances, maybe other than the second sex, or like more on a theoretical standpoint?
Yeah. Well, of course, you know the second sex, which is the second wave of feminism, of modern feminism. But it's also largely based on the philosophy they developed both of them at the same time, like the bad fate, etc. And you're right, mostly it turns out to be that we talk about Sartre, and then the question, of course, for good reason is, but where's de Beauvoir here? Well, first there is, of course, that book, but we know now from the biographies, as I told you, that they were really working together. And it is quite difficult. Also, if you read the memoirs of Simone de Beauvoir, she will never ever really criticize Sartre. There are some small details or something like, or some extensions in it. The only thing you can say, but that would be very artificial to say, and not the way that Simone de Beauvoir says it, is, yeah, but Mr. Sartre is really a male kind of type of freedom, and what about women? But this is, de Beauvoir always get angry if people said that, because she fully supported their philosophy of existentialism, of freedom, of the free subject that's responsible for itself, and she translated that in a very fascinating way in the Second Sex. That would be the most fair answer to say, yeah.
I saw some more hands there, yeah.
I just had a question as to what Sartre and de Beauvoir thought about correctness and ethics. For example, if they were able to establish the society that they wanted through their activism,
yeah.
However, then someone said no to the society that they established, would they then recognize this person's freedom to disagree with them, or would they think that they're incorrect in their saying of no?
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult because yeah, how to respond to that? So they were confronted with a lot of criticism because they were so famous, especially in the 60s. No, well, in the beginning also. So after World War II, so their position was highly debatable. And I think this is all, and this is all, again, this is my idea of puberty. Is, yeah, they were kind of revolutionary thinkers, so they want to feel the disagreement in society as it is. This was their main goal. If you ask Simone de Beauvoir, well, you are criticizing so men and women who are so in bad faith in the book. It's a quite awkward book to read, so it's very shocking if you read it. What is the solution? That's what people always asking, what is the solution? She doesn't have a solution. She doesn't have a solution in the Second Sex. She wants to show what is happening. In that kind of way, it's a phenomenology, and it is not, this is the problem and this is the solution. That's what we are taught and learned. And I think that is not a good idea, because first you have to make a very good description about what is society, what is a human being, etc. But Simone de Beauvoir, also the later Simone de Beauvoir, she was very heavily attacked by the postmodern generation, by Hélène Cixous, Julia Kristeva, by all kinds of new postmodern feminists. But that's great. That's really what philosophy is, and I think that's really what they liked also. Sartre, for instance, and this is a little bit of an anecdote, Sartre somewhere says in an interview he didn't like people of his age when he was so old. He was always among people from 20 years old, 20, 21, 22, etc. And he was discussing with them. And then he says, well, people of old age, they are so dull, and they always say the same thing, and I don't like that. I want to quarrel with them. And yeah, that's a little bit in the spirit also of existentialism.
Other questions? Yes.
Hello, it's a lovely lecture, but I was wondering, you've talked a lot about his metaphysical philosophy and self-determinism, but what was his take on ethical philosophy? Like, how does his existentialism relate to ethics?
Yeah, a very good question. And in fact, this is one of the things that Simone de Beauvoir already in the beginning developed in a book before the Second Sex about ethics. And that's not that difficult. If you feel in everything I say, there is a kind of an imperative in it. It is not just only a phenomenology or metaphysics or whatever. No, if it is true that I'm responsible for myself, we have a new concept of what responsibility is. And I think this is the beginning about the ethics, so to say, about the ethics of existentialism. But it is not that much in ethics in the modern sense of the word. Mostly, if we teach ethics here in the philosophy, there you see that ethics is what's the right thing to do, and then you have to think critically about. But that's not what it is. So ethics means here to be fully engaged with the freedom you are, and therefore there is not so much needed a necessity to develop an existentialist ethics, because it is already ethics. Like it is already a politics, because you cannot understand existentialism and the responsibility for the freedom without ethics and without politics.
But if you take responsibility for your actions, you do have to also sort of subjectively decide: is this right? Is this wrong? What are the outcomes and how do I value them? Right?
Yeah, yeah. I would say, and we can discuss about that, but that would be a mistake of many kinds of modern ethics, is that we can decide what we will do. In existentialism, you do something, and then maybe you think, oh God, what have I done? Like in the example I gave. And this is the ethical part. It is a little bit like, what Sigmund Freud will tell you in psychoanalysis. It is always nachträglich, it is always afterwards. But this afterwardness is for Sartre very important, not because because I determine myself with the choices I made. And there is never a position in which I can say, oh yeah, but at the time I made this choice, but now today it is not my choice anymore, and it's not my life, things like that. No, it is, you made yourself something by the choices you made. So, which means not choosing like a consumer. So I am something and I can choose there in the supermarket. That's not the point. But if I do something in life, if I act, I determine myself with that, and I'm responsible for that. And there's no escape. It's a very severe philosophy, especially ethical. There's no escape, there's no excuse. There is no excuse in existentialism. Like in the other good question, so as if you can say, but here we have really a kind of an exception to the rule, and you are excused for it. No, and it's fully what you were. You are your freedom, and that's the only ethical rule. Not the ethical rule coming from norms and values or traditions or whatever it is. Maybe it is, but if this is your choice, it is your choice. Then you choose that this is you. And this is the famous answer also in an interview of Sartre. So what is the existentialist ethics is, well, can I live my life as if everything that happens to me is my own choice? Yeah.
There's room for one more question. Yeah. The lady in yellow.
Yeah, thank you so much for this lecture. I think the question that I have would kind of continue the conversation that we just had. So I was thinking then, if you need to make a choice, right? So you were also talking about like inert object and inertia versus actually acting.
Yeah.
Then does it mean that the choice should always be productive and lead to productivity? And if it is, does it kind of kill the freedom of it? So then you make a choice that has to be productive.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that's always a little bit a danger of making the choice. So I will answer the question with the other existentialist we didn't talk about, is Albert Camus. And I mentioned the famous book, The Rebel. And here Camus is criticizing also Sartre and Beauvoir, who was so enthusiastic for revolution and for communism at the time. And everybody at the time was, it was just after World War II. So communism was seen as the big new world order. It was before that we knew what Stalin did in the concentration camps, etc. That's true. But however, so the criticism of Camus was, yeah, okay, revolt, as we talked about it, revolt, saying no, is extremely important. This is what a human being is. But revolution always has the danger that it becomes a set of rules, and then now we have the solution. Like I said, why Beauvoir doesn't have a solution in the second sex. There's no solution to it, and that's the difference that Camus is making between revolt and revolution. And revolution always ends up in, and we have seen that in history many times before, revolution always ends up in violence and terror, and no, not always, but in most cases. There are only a few beautiful examples, and we are hoping that revolution in Syria will turn out to be one of the best, but we all, at the same time, we are very afraid that it will be not. So, and I think that's an interesting and important nuance of Camus towards Sartrean and Beauvoirian existentialism. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, all of you, for participating so well. And thank you, Professor Ruud Welten, for this lecture tonight. Give him a last warm hand of applause.
Thank you.